Cool. Well, guys, it's a privilege to be with you. Brian asked me to run one of these tracks for you guys tonight, and I know Brian and Patty from when I served overseas in the Breakthrough location for 8 years, and they were bringing over teams. So that's how I first met them, which is great. And that's my connection to Boston. It's a little connection, but a treasured one. Just loved having teams come over when we were serving over there from your guys' city and your schools to share the gospel with college students in another part of the world. And that's what we're talking about tonight is evangelism. And specifically, like, how do we make it clear that people need to make a decision? So I'm going to kind of cover it a little bit broadly at first, and then we're going to key in a little bit at that at the end. So that's kind of where I'm headed. I do think it's a little ironic that I am talking about evangelism because I do not, I work for Cru. The evangelism is a big part of my job, but I do not have a gift of evangelism. I've seen some people who have the gift of evangelism, and it's incredible to watch. And I just don't have that gift. I'm not like super clever in my presentation. I don't have outlandish results when I share with people. So I don't have a gift, but I do have a calling. I have a calling from Jesus to share the gospel with people, and that's actually not a special calling. That's the calling that every Christian gets. We have good news about Jesus, about what he's done in our lives and what he's doing in the world. And that's a calling that we all share. He sends us all of us wherever we are with the opportunity to share the gospel. I love what Esme shared. Wasn't that a great story? I think she's not in here, but that was just so encouraging. She's praying for opportunities, and then as they pop up, as God provides them, she's taking those opportunities and asking good questions. That was incredible. So I think that's just a great setup for this topic. One of the things that really encourages me as a person who is not gifted from God in evangelism is from Romans 1, verses 16 and 17, which says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith." And for me, that's just become so freeing as I think about, gosh, I want to get on campus. I want to talk to college students and share the gospel. I got neighbors I want to share with because I get probably a lot of the same feelings that you guys might get where I get anxious. How are they going to respond? What are people going to think of me? Those things definitely flood my mind. Those feelings definitely hit me hard. But it's like, what's the power of God? Is it me? Is it my presentation? Is it how smooth I am? It's not. It's the gospel. The gospel is the power of God for salvation, says the Bible in Romans 1. And that just helps me because it's like, I just got to get the words out of my mouth. You know, I'm so worried about how I'm going to come off and how smooth I'm going to be. But really, I just need to say Jesus and then let it go from there. We're rolling downhill now, Now I got to say something because I just said the name Jesus. And where are we going to go with this? The gospel is the power of salvation, and that gives me confidence. It's not me, it's the gospel, it's the message. Like I said, we served in Breakthrough, a Middle Eastern country, majority Muslim. Official statistics put that at 99%, although I'd say it's probably a little lower. When you talk with people, there's people who on paper are Muslim, but they actually are something like agnostic to atheist. But either way you cut it, it's a pretty tough crowd. Not people who are automatically receptive to the gospel message. And one year, one of our campus teams there, the staff calculated how many students does it take for us to meet to find one student who's like open to the gospel. And you know what number they came up with? Quick guesses. You can put it in the chat. You can unmute. What do you think? How many students are you going to meet one person who's open to the gospel? Lauren has a hand up. 5. Oh, that's your actual guess. 5. Great. Grace, 52. Guys, Roland is the winner. He hit it on the nose. 200. We had to meet 200 students to find one student who was open to the gospel. And I think one of the things that really drove home as you're doing evangelism and meeting a lot of people and having a lot of just first contact conversations with people is, man, it doesn't matter how smooth my presentation is. It doesn't. It's just so overwhelming. This isn't mainly about me and how I present the gospel. It's mainly about the gospel going forward and it being the power of God. And is God at work in this person's life right now or not? Because when we had smooth presentations, people were unresponsive. When we had junkie presentations, people were unresponsive. And then you'd meet that 1 in 200, and it didn't matter how smooth it was. It didn't matter if you were making all kinds of mistakes, because God was at work in that person's heart, and it was so clear. So I think that just really drove home that this work is a spiritual work. It's relational. We want to be not mean. We want to be not unclear. We want to be not unhelpful, right? We want to speak the truth in love. We want to be gracious and truthful, but it's not about us ultimately. It's about, is God working in this person's heart? And am I putting the gospel out there for it to do the work that it's powerful to do? So, what is evangelism and what's the gospel? Those words, our English words, evangelism and gospel, come from a Greek word, uh, a single group Greek root word, euangelion, which you've probably heard people say before, but maybe not. And that just breaks down into a two-part word, which means good message or good news. And classically, euangelion was used, especially when a herald would run home from a battlefield to announce a military victory and proclaim, good news, we won this victory, right? And so the Christians co-opted euangelion, gospel, good news, for their own message in the first century, because Jesus had really won an incredible victory, and they wanted to announce it to everyone and anyone who would listen. And so we translate that Greek word, euangelion, into English as the noun gospel and as the verb evangelize. So two kind of very different words in English that actually come from the same, Greek root word. And evangelism is really just sharing that good news message about Jesus. It's really that simple. And we call that the gospel. So as we think about sharing the gospel, we face just a few challenges for sure. Challenge number one, which I've already talked about, is, man, what are people going to think? How are they going to react? What are they going to think about me? Am I going to screw it up? Kind of the thoughts and feelings that immediately rush to us that are often, centered on me. Those are very common thoughts and very natural feelings. And the answer to those questions, what are people going to think of me? They're going to think you're weird. Can we just put it on the table and be honest about this? They're going to think you're weird, because you're weird for Jesus. Put the W over your face. You are weird for Jesus. Like, again, like Esme said, can I geek out on Jesus for a minute with you guys? Right? Man, we're weird for Jesus. And that's actually okay. Another scripture that gives me confidence, again, as a person who is not naturally gifted, but has a calling like you guys. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 14 to 16. Let me read that one for you guys. That one says, "But thanks be to God, who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. For we are the aroma of Christ to God, amongst those who are being saved and amongst those who are perishing. To one a fragrance from death to death, and to the other a fragrance from life to life." And what's that saying? Basically, for some people, our message of good news, what really is good news, stinks. It just smells horrible, and it's death to them. And for other people, that same message that really is good news smells like life. It's the best thing that they've ever heard. And it doesn't matter who the messenger is, and it doesn't matter how you share the message ultimately, right? It either is the aroma of death or the aroma of life. And God leads us in a triumphal procession, picking up on that same theme of victory, a military victory, right? And that takes the pressure off of me. And hopefully that takes some pressure off of you too. It's like, it doesn't, I mean, if as long as you're not being rude, right? Like, very low bar to clear. Just don't be rude, right? Just put the gospel out there. It's going to be what it is to the person. It has less to do about you, and it has everything to do with their spiritual receptiveness, their spiritual nose. What does it smell like to them? That goes right to their soul. So challenge number two, how do you share the gospel? And I think I just want to, again, like, I think my main goal is like to give you grace and to give you some tools in your tool bag, so you feel like, "Ah, I can't screw this up. I just got to open my mouth and try." You know what I mean? So here's just a few things. Okay, what's Cru going to say? How do you share the gospel? What are we going to say? We're going to say, would you like to know God personally? Right? So you can use a booklet, and the booklet is a great tool. It's not the only way that you can share the gospel. We do it a lot. Its upside is it's very concise and clear. Like, it gets straight to the point. Um, its downside is it doesn't include everything you could say, right? It's also laid out in kind of a sort of a theoretical framework, right? A propositional framework. And for some people, that just isn't going to hit home. You know, it's a good tool. It isn't the only tool, but it's a good one. pros and cons. Another way that you could share the gospel is you could share a story from the Bible, from a gospel in particular. I think would be a great choice. And I think let me just point out a few, and these are just a few because you could pick other ones too. But in John, 3 stories, John 3, John 4, John 8, are some good options, because John 3 is Nicodemus coming to Jesus and saying, what do I need to do to be born again? They have that conversation, and that's where Jesus says, you need to be born again. God so loved the world that he sent his only son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but will have eternal life. Whoever doesn't believe in this son stands condemned already, right? So that's John 3. John 4 is Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well, and they have this back and forth about her personal life and him being the living water, and she'll never be thirsty again if she drinks of the living water. And eventually she realizes he is the Messiah. She has this personal epiphany, but he calls to attention her sinful life and calls her out of that. John 8, at the beginning of that chapter, is the woman caught in adultery. The Pharisees bring a woman who is caught in adultery. Where's the guy? Not fair. But and they want to stone her, but Jesus says, he who's without sin can cast the first stone. They all leave, and he says, did anyone condemn you? She says, no. He says, neither do I. Now go and sin no more. Right. What I love about these stories is they're stories. Stories resonate with people. They have a much higher level of resonance than a propositional presentation. 2, they get a lot of those main elements of the gospel that are in this booklet anyway: God, sin, Jesus, and then a commitment. You got to make a decision. And that's really those 4 points in this booklet, is those 4 things, right? God made us and loves us. We are sinful and separated. Jesus came to bridge the separation, and we need to respond, And so I think those 3 stories are good ones. You could do Ephesians 2, which is not a story. It's also a little propositional, but it's tight and it's in one spot. Ephesians 2, which is included in the booklet as well. Or you can even just draw it. If you think the person sitting across from you is going to be more receptive to an artistic presentation, you could draw out a diagram of these same kinds of things, like is in the Would You Like to Know God Personally booklet, the diagram of God's on top and people are on the bottom. We try to get to him with the arrows, right? But it's never enough because we have sin in our life. But then Jesus comes down. God came down as God the Son to bridge that gap, right? That drawing could be much more effective, for some people than, 4-point outlines and stories. You just got to take a shot with the person sitting across from you and, go with how God's leading you, or what is your best estimation of what's going to land for this person that you're talking to. But in any way that you're sharing the gospel, one, man, get as far as you're going to get. No pressure to get all the way through 4 points if they're not ready for 4 points, right? Get as far as you can get. There can be a second conversation and a third conversation. So again, I just want to take the pressure off, right? But eventually we want to get to the point where we say, hey, here's who God is and who you are, what Jesus has done. So what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about that? How are you going to respond? So challenge 3 is making it clear that a response is required. I should be looking at my time, and I want to make sure that I'm not doing bad on time. Who's my timekeeper? I am actually nodding my head.
You've got 5 minutes left, and then there's
5
going to be, hopefully, if the technology works, a little 2-minute reminder, and you'll have those 2 bonus minutes. Then again, it's Zoom, so who knows?
Who knows? Okay, good. This is great. We're doing great, guys. Man, again, the gospel, it's a good news message, right? But it's one that requires a response. It's like an invitation. You have to RSVP. That's what Jesus is looking for. He's looking for your RSVP to this invitation. And it's a weighty invitation, right? It's not like we use the analogy of it's a gift, and it is a gift, right? We don't earn it. But it's not like it's not as light as somebody bought you a gift and you didn't open the package, even though that's in some ways true of the gospel, that it is a gift, right? It's much weightier than that, right? It's a peace offering from a conquering king to a rebellious people. He's offering peace, but these terms of peace, like, you really do need to respond to them. Like, it's weighty. It's like an invitation to a committed relationship, and that relationship is with God and with Jesus, right? It would kind of be like it's like a proposal. If somebody got down on their knees and they told you all the things that they love about you, and they professed their undying love to you, and they asked you for your hand in marriage, and then you said, that's interesting, and that was it, You know what I mean? That is we do that with Jesus and with the gospel message. People do, is what I'm saying, right? Interesting information. I'm glad I know that. But it's like, no, no, no. This was a proposal. Are you in or are you out? Are we doing this thing or are we not doing this thing, right? That's really what the gospel is saying, is Jesus has gone to great lengths to rescue and redeem and bring you into this great relationship with him individually and with this family of believers that makes up the body of Christ. All those great images. Are you in or are you out? You know, so that's probably a fuller way to think about it, and it does require a response. We needed to respond to the gospel, and our friends need to have that same opportunity. Our family members need to have that same opportunity. The people that we study with, that we work with, that we live next to, they need to have that same opportunity to hear and to respond to the gospel. So how can we make that clear? Just a couple of Bible verses that show that could be good to think about or even share. Revelation 3:20, it's also in that Knowing God Personally booklet. Jesus says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone opens the door, I'm going to come in and eat with him and he will eat with me," right? This picture of fellowship, of dining together, which is so crucial in Eastern cultures. Or another one is Mark 8:27 through 30, where Jesus asks his disciples, "Hey, what's the word on the street? Who do people say that I am? What's going on? What's the buzz around town?" And they tell him. And then he says, "Who do you say that I am?" Right? Jesus gets to the point. He's like, "But who do you say that I am?" He's asking all of us that same question, right? We need to respond. And I think really those illustrations, this is another way that's great to make it clear. In this booklet, whether you use the booklet or you just draw this on a napkin with the little circles, I'm going to get this right up to my camera, right? These circles represent two kinds of lives. Man, this is such a great way to make it clear. It's like, hey, is Jesus in your life or is he not in your life? You know, there can be there can be a third kind of life that you could represent where he's in your life and you're not really yielding to him. People do that, but it's like, okay, yeah, but if you had to pick between these two, which one best represents your life? Brian and I were chatting about this, and he introduced a couple pre-questions here that I think are helpful with these circles. And he asks, "What's the difference between these two circles?" Before he gets into these questions that are printed down here. When you look at these, what's the difference? And the difference is, Jesus is in or out. But this helps you know, are they tracking with me or not? And then the other one is, how would someone go from one circle to the next? And the answer is not going to church, trying harder, being a good person. The answer is by trust, by faith, in Jesus, right? So then you can ask those two questions that are down there, which is, which one best represents your life right now? And I always ask, why'd you say that? After that, whichever one they pick. And then I say, which one would you like to represent your life? And then again, they pick one and I say, why do you say that? Some people say, I'm not sure, or a third one or whatever. And I still ask, why would you say that? Because I think in here, this track is called the Explorer track. Even in making the decision clear, we just want to be explorers with people. Like, hey, where are you at? And where do you want to be at? And what do you think your next step is? You know what I mean? And hey, if they're ready to make a next step to go from the circle on the left to the circle on the right, Jesus is out to Jesus is in. Great, let's take that step. Hey. And if they're not ready, that's okay too, because we're explorers with them, and we want to help people if they're ready to take the next steps, and they may not be. Brian, I'm seeing the signals.
You've got the magic 2 minutes. I think it's
I got
going
the
to keep us
magic
in here.
2 minutes. Guys, I'm going to put a couple of application points that are on here. I'm putting it in the chat. You can check this out. I would love for you to try this, because with evangelism, the best thing to do is to go try it, not just learn about it, go give it a go. So get a friend or three together and go sharing, whether it's on campus, whether it's in a public space, whatever your options are, because I know things are weird with COVID, right? But go give it a try, because practice doesn't make perfect, but it does make better. So give it a try. It'll make it less scary. I got this little helpful prayer and evangelism bookmark from Heather Holloman that I posted in here. You can click on that to go get that yourself. And she and her husband, who are Cru staff, and she's a professor at Penn State, wrote a book about being sent and living a lifestyle of inviting people to Jesus. So I'd recommend that to you as well.